Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome someone who's done so many things and so many credits to her name. But just to name a few, she's an attorney and politician. She's the president and CEO of Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. She's the former regional director of the Anti-Defamation League. She ran for Congress here in Florida, and there are so many others that we'll try to get to, but please help me welcome Hava Holzhauer. Hava, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation.
Well, we have a lot to cover, but I want to start by going back with you. So you grew up in DC, right? So what was your family life like, and in particular with regard to Judaism?
So I actually was born in DC, but I grew up mostly in the Chicago suburbs,
Oh, okay.
and then in Boston. My dad was a hospital administrator, so every time he got a new job, we got a new city. So I was born in DC, spent a few years in the suburbs of Detroit, and then most of elementary, middle, and the first semester of high school in Chicagoland in the northern suburbs, and then Framingham, Massachusetts for high school. So
Before
grew up in a variety of places, but really to get to your question, in Chicago is I'd say formative years and the growing up years. It was a community where there were a lot of Jewish people. I went to public school. I went to Hebrew school after school. My parents were very involved in the community
Hmm.
Jewishly, and I learned a lot from them during that time.
So were you observant at all?
So we were conservative
Okay.
and we went to shul on, Saturdays. My dad, I would say, made us go because it was a time in our lives where it wouldn't have been the choice if we had the choice. My mom usually stayed home on Saturday mornings, and my siblings and I went with my dad. Um, and I remember very vividly, like if we left, the sanctuary to go into the hallway and like run around with our friends, my dad would time us. And we'd have to be back in a certain time or we were in very big trouble. So I would, wear a watch. It was before the cell phones, and I would time myself and I'd come
Oh, that's
back in and
great.
then I would just wait for the next time when I could, run out again.
The so I'm just curious. I wasn't planning on asking this about that, but you and I have similar like backgrounds there because I moved around a lot as well. I mean, I lived in Israel, I lived in Mexico, I lived in Florida, New York. So what was that like for you? I mean, was it tough to acclimate to like new places a lot if you moving around so much?
The plus, and of course, this is like a looking back and a hindsight perspective, was that I became very adaptable, right? And able to make new friends and start anew. And I feel lucky and blessed that that was my experience. I know that's not easy for everybody. It's helped me in adulthood to have learned to do that as a young person. It's also made me someone who really considers myself not attached to a particular geography, but attached to the people and attached to what's going on, which also helps me a lot in my work. I know that others are, stay in one place for a very long time, or maybe, raise their kids in a certain house and they still have that house all the way into grandparent and
Right.
great grandparenthood. And it was. I feel very lucky that it was not uh, difficult. It's something that I remember really well, starting over and starting over and starting over.
Mhm.
But I was always curious about other people. So that made me outreaching, when I would come to a new place. I didn't wait for somebody to come up to me and say hello. But I also remember those friends, those friendships, those people who were outreaching, especially moving after one semester of high school from Chicago to,
Right.
the Boston area.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head because to me, it was tough moving around too, but you got to learn. I mean, different countries. I lived in different cultures, and you got to make a whole. It sucked leaving the friends always, but it was nice getting to see how different people lived, and it made you adaptable, like you said, in the future. It's very, very true what you said. So you also you're the descendant of Holocaust survivors. So I'm curious, was that talked about at all when you were growing up? Was it, was it talked, was it hidden? Because I've interviewed different people, and everyone has different experience. Some like just didn't want to discuss it whatsoever, and some, yes, we should just talk about it. So how was it in your family?
It wasn't hidden. My grandfather died. My maternal grandfather died when my mom was 6 months pregnant with me, so I never met him. But my maternal grandmother, really, I lived with her, not in the same home, but in the same town my entire childhood. So we did talk about it. And what amazes me, from start to finish, my entire experience with her, um, is she always was positive. She never dove into any of the negative. She always talked about how amazing her life was in Germany and how she was such a great German, and never went into sort of the dark places and um, the stories of, escape and survival. My mom, the next generation sort of picked that up and delved into the details of her mom's story and her dad's story and was able to share that with us. But that wasn't until I was, post college that I started to learn more of those
So
details.
they were both you had different both sets of grandparents, or just one set of grandparents that were Holocaust survivor?
My maternal grandparents were, not the other side. My dad's parents, the paternal, they came from Poland and they came in the early 30s, I think, or mid 30s. So they got out in time, let's put it that way. And then his mother, their family is from Kiev,
Okay.
from Russia, from Ukraine.
So my
And they
so
were already in the US. Yeah.
my grandmother was as well from there. It seems like a lot of people came from that area. So when you were growing up, I mean, just so you said they did share their stories for you. Was there like I don't know how to phrase this exact. Was there like a feeling like, I guess gratefulness for this country, or like, just like things cannot happen like it over there, over here? Was it like that sense in talking to your family?
I, you know, people people react very differently to trauma,
Hmm.
right? That's what we're talking about a bit here. And I think it's a blessing and I think it's an innate skill. I don't know how much it can develop, when somebody, can sort of turn the lemons into lemonade or bring to top of mind only the positive. And my grandmother, that's how she was. And I didn't think about it as a young person. Like that's just what I accepted, whatever she shared with me. And it was always about, her parents, her siblings, her positive life. She did not at all talk about like the Holocaust at
Okay.
all. So it was never a part of what we talked about. And it's interesting that you're bringing this up right now because this just actually resurfaced as a memory for me because one of the things that I'm doing at Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona is we started something called the Center for Jewish Resilience. And
So that's what.
it's really an effort to hone and bring together best practices in pushing back against contemporary anti-Semitism.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we're doing is we're fielding local incidents, which of course you do it, to be helpful to the local population, but also what it does is it tells us what's going on behind the scenes that you don't see, and it helps direct our work. Like, what do we need to do to make this better? Let's see what's going on right in our backyard. And I had a 2-hour meeting with a professor at one of the Arizona universities about a month ago. And she was telling her story, which is really a story of systematic gaslighting and demotion, to summarize it,
Mhm.
uh, because she didn't pass the litmus test of saying, I don't support Israel, and this
Right.
is our contemporary anti-Semitism issue. But what she kept coming back to is she kept saying things like, I was always such a well-liked professor. The students always loved me. My peers always thought I was great. I was such a good teacher. And I was having flashbacks to my Nana saying, I was such a good German. We were such good,
Right.
citizens. We had this fantastic store. We supported the community. And I felt that again today.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely get to your organization there because I thought it was fascinating. I did a lot of research on that too. But going back to you, when you were growing up, I mean, you've done so many things. So when you were growing up, what did you want to do? What did you have in mind for yourself back then?
So I always thought I would do something in the justice space. I was
You
always
did from
very
a kid. From
verbal.
a kid, you wanted to do that.
Yeah, as a kid, I was a natural advocate, and I believe me, I know that a lot of people that's not, a natural part of their personality. I was, in elementary school, got in a fist fight with a boy that was, bullying other girls. That was fun. I think I came home with a bloody nose that day.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, as a middle schooler, I stood up, the girl who was the queen bee and hurting everybody else. I had a suggestion for how we could, work on that and turn it around and make our environment much happier in middle school. And I did it, and it worked. And I ran for, student government. I was president. I remember singing a song like "If I Were President" when I was running in eighth grade. And so the issues of advocacy and justice, changed throughout the years. When I had my kids in my 20s, and my issue then was, my husband and I would take them out to eat, and the changing tables were only in the men's restrooms at the restaurants, and it drove me crazy. And so I'd speak to the manager, and I would follow it through, and I'm like, you got to have the changing table in both spaces. And
Which is
yeah,
odd though,
so.
because I've usually seen them in the well, not seen them that I walked in, but in the women's restroom, which is odd that they would just be in the men's one.
Oh, I said that wrong. They were just in the women's.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
No, no,
okay,
no. I'm glad you caught that. No,
okay,
they were just in the women's bathrooms. They
got
were
it.
not in the
Okay,
men's. So that meant every time, we needed to change one of the kids, it was on
on
me
you, right, right, right.
to go take care of it. Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you totally on that there too. So what prompted you to? So you were already doing it. It's amazing that you doing this as a kid. You were running for class president. You already advocate. So what prompted you to go into law? And first, also, what kind of law did you first go into?
I started in employment law. My trajectory, I went straight. I didn't have any time off or any years in between. I think today it's a lot more common, to think about these things a little bit more. I was just sort of on a go, go, go path. So I went straight from undergrad to law school. I actually thought, because one of my undergrad majors, I went to Tufts, and I studied environmental science and psychology. And I thought I wanted to be like Erin Brockovich. That was my big plan. I was gonna, save the world through the environment. And I looked for a law school, and I did. I started off at a law school where that was, a very strong area. And then I realized it was a lot of paperwork, and it became less interesting to me because it wasn't working with the people. And with a justice mind and a justice heart, I'm always wanting to make an impact, and to see that impact on people. So I'm not quite sure how I moved from that into employment, but when you're in law school, you get these clerkships or these, associate, positions over the summer. And I worked for a judge in city court, and that was, eye-opening. Had never really had any experience with criminal law. So very eye-opening to the criminal justice system, and particularly to juvenile justice, or lack of justice, however you want to put it. And I got a job with this employment attorney who is one of, he has since passed. His name was Paul Tobias, and he was the founder of NELA, the National Association for Employment Lawyers, and
Hmm.
he literally wrote like the wrongful discharge litigation texts. And I got to work for him for 2 years, and I learned so much. And we were on the plaintiff side of, discrimination cases, workplace discrimination cases, hostile environment, uh, you know, discrimination because of race, because of pregnancy. Those are some of the cases that I remember. And it was also when the Family Medical Leave Act was just rolled out. And so I got to be part in that work of rolling out the first version of the Family Medical
Oh,
Leave
wow.
Act, gave parents the opportunity to take some time off work and not be at risk of losing their jobs when they had new babies. Um,
I'm still back to amazed at all the things that you were doing as an adult that you were doing as a kid, but still, so you eventually started prosecuting. So you eventually prosecuting hate crimes. So I have a couple of questions with this. I mean, first, is that something that you wanted to do? Because it seems like a natural progression, or did you kind of get thrust into it?
it and I kind of got thrust into it. You only know what you know. And, we weren't Googling and using the internet in the same way when we were in high school, right?
Right.
When I was in high school, then like my kids, who have this access to knowing all the opportunities. Like I didn't know there was a JAG Corps, for example, which might have been something I'd be interested in if I'd known about it at that age. Um, I moved from Chicago to Florida in the early 2000s. And that, long story short, there's like no reciprocity in Florida, and you have to take the bar again. And it's very different to take the
Oh.
bar like many years later when you weren't just in school. And so I was going through that process in Florida, and I was saying, it's an opportunity for a new beginning. What do I want to do? And I thought, I have never worked in criminal other than that clerkship. And so I kind of jumped into it thinking that it was another thing that I could learn about, justice in this country. And so I got hired as an assistant state attorney in South Florida. I mean, it's an incredible learning ground, not just to be a litigator, which I already was, but
Hmm.
you have this tremendous caseload of, I remember having like 150 when you're in county court, and it's the lower level sort of misdemeanors and the third degree felonies. You have this huge caseload, and you're prioritizing and you're resetting cases, and you're trying to find the ones that are really important that you need to get
Uh,
to. There's never enough time in the day.
mhm.
Um, and I felt every day I'd go home and I would feel this huge weight of responsibility. And I couldn't believe that I had this deferential, you know, power to make decisions about consequences, for people who violated the law. And I just took that super seriously. It was a really intense job. And then after being in county, most people want to go into felony. It's considered more prestigious. They want to do, the really serious crimes. And I intentionally chose youth court. I wanted to go into juvenile. So I went into juvenile, and that's where I spent most of my time as an assistant state attorney. It's it's the most collaborative, I guess, of the spaces to be as a prosecutor. Um, I volunteered in youth court while I was there. I did a lot of, um, volunteer work with human trafficking, which
Wow.
is
Wow.
a major issue in South Florida. So yes, it's a lot of things, but I would guess it wasn't really chosen, but it sort of naturally came came to be.
It's got to be so mentally wearing on you. I mean, one of my first jobs, my very real job was like counseling at that time. It was called, for retarded, now, mentally challenged, but it wears on you to like see what's going on and just how people are treated a lot of times. And it just so that had to be like mentally draining for you also.
It was incredibly mentally draining. One of my friends, who is a social worker,
Right.
she's a very good friend of mine, and she always says, "You're so lucky. You have all your blocks in a row, because." And I do feel very blessed by that. Like what she means by that is that I'm able to recalibrate
Hmm.
and and take the trauma and all these negative things, and then wake up the next day. It's very Jewish, Modeh Ani,
Yes.
right? It's a new day. We're starting a new day, and here we go. And what can I do today, right, to make a difference and to make things better? But I do remember very vividly because I had four young children at home when I was a prosecutor that were under the age of 7 when I started, 4 kids.
Right.
And I would leave work and I would like sometimes just cry in the car
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
releasing all the things from the day. And then when I got home, I would sometimes drive around my community because I wasn't ready. I knew as soon as I got in my driveway, I'd be on mom duty,
Mhm.
and I wasn't ready yet. So So yeah, thanks for asking that. It was heavy, but it was important
No,
and worth doing.
absolutely. So I want to follow up with that because the stats show like over the past 15 years or so, just anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic hate crimes have just risen dramatically. Now, it's gone even beyond that since October 7th when it just skyrocketed. So did you see the same thing working those cases that when you were there, like, just when it started spiking at some point when you were there?
It wasn't spiking when I was there. The
Hmm.
first time I saw it spiking was when the period of time after I switched sort of careers and from litigation to Jewish leadership and nonprofit management, which was the huge change when I went to ADL.
Someone asked that.
Um, that's where I started to see it spiking. That's when stuff that was happening on campus was surfacing, and I would give seminars like about that, showing pictures of some of the pink washing that was going on, for
Right.
example, and ways they were, you know, how the ideas of progressivism
Mhm.
in, 2013 were already starting to create a divide between Jewish people, and everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna get to that too. Because well, first, how did you get involved with the ADL?
So I'd been working in law for a very long time. And at the same time, I was a volunteer in the Jewish community. I was the chair of my Jewish Community Relations Council at the, Federation of South Palm Beach County. I was a graduate of the Hadassah Leadership Academy. My husband and I had been youth group leaders for a couple of different youth groups at different temples. Um, I was also involved as a volunteer in different legal areas like youth court and the Women Lawyers Association and things like that. But I had a lot of Jewish things on my volunteer resume.
Okay.
And somebody came to me in the community, ADL in Florida, which was a statewide office. They had gone through an 18-month search for a new exec,
Oh, well.
and they had hired someone. And 2 weeks before he was supposed to start, he backed out. So
Oh,
yeah, they were exhausted. They had already disbanded their search committee and they were looking for somebody new. And so someone just approached me and said, you have this kind of hate and anti-Semitism piece, and you have these volunteer pieces, and would you have any interest in this? And I thought about it for quite a while, and I got to meet Abe Foxman because he
right.
was the person hiring me, and went to New York, and after that I was sold, and I think of it as a marriage of my career and my volunteer activities. So,
What were your responsibilities for them when you started?
so I mentioned it was region wide, which, statewide, the office. So
Mhm.
one of the things was we had just combined three boards. There used to be three different offices right before I stepped in, one in West Palm, one in Miami, and I'm trying to remember where the third one was. Maybe it was on the West Coast. So we had board members all over the state. Um, I had to dive right into to building a really strong team to handle the work. And what was so memorable to me was the tool that I had always used in my like justice and advocacy work was the law as an adult, right? That was my toolbox.
Mm.
Negotiation, mediation, maybe, but the law. And my work at ADL, it was like opening my eyes to a whole new set of tools to use in this work, right? So allyship building, relationship building, education, right? Incident handling, things that don't rise to the level of criminal, but are still, really important on the pyramid of hate, like stereotyping
Mhm.
and name calling and all those things. The 10 years that led up to the Holocaust, that's what it was. Before you get to violence, right? You have all these other levels
Right.
of hate and anti-Semitism. So I was learning at the same time I was building and strengthening our organization.
So you would get like reports on things and like like you mentioned a second ago, like about on schools, like, anti-Semitism in schools. So you would get reports on that, and like the ADL in your department would go to like see what you could do, address that.
Exactly. So somebody would call, from the community and say, I'm having, this problem at my school. And it could be anything from it's Yom Kippur and they're having the exam and they shouldn't
Right.
have the exam, right? To something more nuanced and more difficult to put a finger on, but that showed some pattern of either harassment or discrimination. And then the obvious things, which were when there's graffiti,
Yeah.
something that does cross the line into something like criminal mischief related. We would get those calls and some of my team members would investigate and help. You come in as a third party and you write a letter to the school or you call the principal or you know, reach out, you have a better opportunity to find a resolution and also to educate, the people in power, the other stakeholders as to why this is, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and problematic.
How was the reception from when if you could receive the report, like let's say could be from the school, could be something else, that you received the reception and you went to speak to people and saying, "Hey, we have a problem here." Were they very resistant to it, or a lot of times they were like, "Oh, let's work together and let's stop this."
At that time, 2013,
Right.
2017, they were very receptive.
Hmm.
They were very receptive. It was, ADL had been at it for a very long time. Abe Foxman had been at it for a very long time. And still, it has a name in the community as an important and big organization. It carries the weight of, the whole country. And people were responsive. So, we could usually get that first meeting. That wasn't the hard part. It's a lot harder today to
Yeah,
get the
I was
first.
going to ask you now because I assume that you saw how the largest teachers union, the NEA, voted to cut ties with the ADL. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that now.
I hate to say it, but I think it's real. I think we had some missteps over the last 3, 4 decades as a Jewish community. I think there's a lot of things we've done right. I think there were signs that this ideology that's now contemporary anti-Semitism was on its way. We didn't do enough as it was building and now that's my job, right? Now that's the job of many of us
Right.
is what do we do differently? How do we pivot? How do we approach, just as an example, allyship, where once upon a time, for those of us who did this intergroup work, which is so important to sit down with people of other faiths, of other backgrounds. We used to have, just as an example, when I was at ADL in South Florida, I had two different Jewish Muslim groups.
Mhm.
And we'd eat together. We'd eat together, and maybe we'd pick a topic that was a shared topic so we could find some common ground. We had a gleaning conversation, I remember one time at one of these dinners, because gleaning is something for Muslims as it is something for Jews. Another time we talked about rituals around death and dying, right? But we never got to the meat of identity and who we are, and we certainly never got to Israel in those conversations.
Mhm.
And that showed post October 7, right? On October 8, um, we had we have a lot of friends, but a lot of people who weren't interested in speaking out and stepping up, for our community. And I think we have to modify, and that's what we're starting to do here now in Southern
Yeah,
Arizona, modify the way we think about those relationships and build those relationships with intention.
yeah. I was going to ask, just about to ask you that. I mean, you just you kind of foreshadowed what I was going to ask about that now, because you have all these progressive groups saying things like, we want to be inclusive of everyone, just not you guys. So, I've seen it in publishing for years. I know you and I have a mutual friend that we talked about a little bit that, we're in publishing, and it's just everything's exclusionary of Jews. So what do you think that can be done a lot, to these groups now, because who don't want to include anything Jewish on it?
So it is it's a lot of work that needs to be done. And part of that is our own community really wrapping their heads around that this is serious, that this isn't something that's going away. And I think we've started to do that, right? You see the young, Gen Zers who are on social media and they're speaking up and they're saying, you know what, I'm drawing a line here, right? This isn't right that we're not included. And so naming it and recognizing it as a Jewish community is number one. And we're not fully there yet. We still have a lot of people who think, this will go away. And it's not going away. So what do we do about it? It's a really big question. If I were in charge of the Jewish world, I would ask each of the major Jewish organizations to, hone in on what they do best and stick to it and only do it. And we could start, upsetting the anchor point, because that's what we need to do. There's been a narrative since started in the 1970s. There's been a narrative about Israel and the Palestinians. And that narrative has become a binary, an either or, an equating.
Okay.
And then, of course, the most recent version over the last 15 years is the oppressor
Right.
and the oppressed, and the brown and the white, and so many of these things that actually they're not factually correct, and they really don't work for our community. But we let that narrative take place.
I could not agree with you more. Yeah, it's exactly.
And when we tried to fight it, like we're trying to use facts, right? And facts are so important, but we're past facts because it's now embedded in emotion and in the way people feel. And I still believe, even the protesters on the college campuses, even the young people screaming, even the very confused, Queers for Palestine, for example, ideology. I still believe most people are people of goodwill, but their emotion is wrapped up in an understanding of social justice that is so harmful and, separatist to the Jewish community. And so that's what we're dealing with and what we have to counter.
Well, do you do things like go into the school, because there's all the talk, in which I cannot agree with more of that about the indoctrination in schools about that. So is that something that you would go and tackle there too now?
100%, Jonathan. It is, we've built a committee and we're still building, and it's segmented by different things that we need to tackle, because the strategies for doing so are different depending on what it is. So we have a K through 12 group. We have people working on things at the university level. We have people who are working with NGOs very specifically, that are not Jewish, that are in this progressive space, this social justice space. We have different strategies to, for public affairs, for government affairs, and also for what was the last group? Just businesses, right? We need to talk with everyone, and we need to educate everybody, and it's not a quick fix, right? And then there's the media, by the way. I mean, that's a whole nother strategy that's kind of in our year, 2.5 that we're going to be building up here. But yeah, that's what we do. So by incident handling, so there's different ways to do this. There's not only one way to do it, but it opens the door to a conversation with the decision makers, right?
Mhm.
So an example of an incident, last day of school here in Southern Arizona, one of the middle schools, a Jewish boy's yearbook was signed by 5 other young men, and they all signed his yearbook by drawing swastikas all over his
Oh,
yearbook.
wow. Gee.
And they weren't his friends. We check into that. Were these just young people who think it's funny? Ha ha ha, I'm drawing. No, it was with bad intention. So that is a terrible thing that happened for
Right.
that young person. We're really glad it came our way. Otherwise, there's nothing we could do about it. But it opens the door for us to reach out directly to a principal or to a superintendent and have that conversation about consequences, educating them what to do right about that incident, and then what are you going to do preventatively next year so it doesn't happen again? And that's where we try to work with educators to build resources into their teacher education days, to their, you know, Holocaust education. You have states like Arizona and Florida, for example, where Holocaust education, it's an unfunded mandate. And so what that means is that it's required in K through 12, or it might be, it depends on the district, but 6 through 12. But what that is really varies, and it might not have any teeth to it. So it could be one paragraph in a textbook that's touched on once a year, and that's it, or it could be more robust. And so I see it as our job, for example, to make that curriculum more robust, to have more teachers, humanities teachers, those who are the Holocaust educators, actually building contemporary anti-Semitism into Holocaust
Right.
education. Because if you cut out the hate part and all that we do to other another population of people, which is what the Holocaust was, all about. We were othered for a decade. If I don't even start counting what was before that, just in that period of time, we were, othered, name calling, the scapegoat, the people who were blamed. That's happening right now.
Sure. Sure.
So, and we don't, you don't see it all on the news. The worst things, what just happened in DC and what happened in Boulder, those are the worst of the worst, right? And then it makes national news, and then somebody's talking about it because somebody died, and it's very obvious. But all the little things leading up to the violence, that's where our community, the Jewish community, needs to be fighting right now.
Well, even the things you just mentioned there, like, they were put on the news and saying, just about someone got shot, someone died outside of a museum. They ignore the main fact of it, what was going on. So it's like always trying to like whitewash the anti-Semitism, even in the worst cases, like, let's not talk about that it was a Jewish thing that happened.
100%. And it happens all the time. It's
Yeah.
so interesting because we don't have strong relationships with the editorial boards here in Southern Arizona, and I'm relatively new. And when I first got here, it was just post October 7th, and so all the news stations were calling, and I would run around and do my hair and show up, for the interviews, and really try to share the message of what's going on. And at the end of the day, what actually came out in the news report was so nominal and not meaningful, and contributed to the binary, and the opposite. So I stopped running around because it wasn't helpful. So what we do need to do, though, is build, and it's painstaking and slow, but part of this is building those relationships and teaching and educating those who work in journalism, those who work in all these different fields.
As we're winding down, so okay, you're the president and CEO of the Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. You spoke about it a little bit already. So can you tell me about the organization itself, how it came about, and what it is that they do, and that people can look for it?
I am going to answer that question, but I'm also going to agree with you that this is the moment.
Hmm.
This is the moment, and our community needs to be super engaged and on all fronts in working on this issue. Um, it's so interesting because some people still want to go back to that old anchor point and have this binary conversation. And what I've said is I'm very happy to host a family conversation, right, where we talk about, for example, Israel's strategies in the war, or Israel's government, or what civil society looks like in Israel. That's a family conversation. It's our nation, it's our country that it's our homeland that we of course want to be the best that it can be, and that's a conversation that we can have. But what's not a conversation is a conversation about it not being, and it not having a right to be a country. And I think of it when I'm talking to constituents and donors, who ask these questions, just like as you asked what's Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. It's a federation and it's a Jewish community foundation, and I'll get into that in a second. But the Federation side, we look at the Jewish community and we look at a broad lens, and the goal is to support our institutions and our organizations, to pivot when there are needs that come up, to think about things we might not have or that would make us a stronger community, and to pilot them and to build them, to be the 911 when there's an emergency, when the JCC needs a new roof and there wasn't a contingency plan, whatever it might be. That's what we're doing on the Federation side. And I would never, as a professional or as a person, for example, host a conversation about the utility or the existence of one of the sects of Judaism. I might, align my day-to-day Jewish practice with the conservative movement, for example, and not Chabad. I
Right.
would never host a conversation about, you know, why one is better than the other, or why one shouldn't be, or I would never not include one of those sects. And it's the same thing on Israel. People identify as Jews, not, this. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's not just religion, it's peoplehood, it's nationhood, it's our homeland, it's our culture, it's our heritage, it's our food, it's all these different things. It's tzedakah, it's philanthropy, it's deeds of loving kindness, it's all these things. And Israel's a big piece of that for the vast majority of Jews. And I would never host a conversation, and I will not. That's my red line in the sand or whatever. About whether or not it should be, because it's a part of who we are, it's a part of how we identify. And our challenge right now is to build that into the understanding of the greater community. I just came back from France and spending a lot of time with Jewish Federations of North
I
America.
didn't know that you went to France. I would have asked you about, speaking of anti-Semitism, but go ahead. Yes.
But something that's so interesting there is 70 to 80% of the regular of the broad population
Mhm.
supports Israel,
Yeah.
and is only interested in the war ending, with concessions like the hostages, being released, and
Mhm.
other things. And that's
Oh,
very, very different than it is here. So we have a lot of work to do. I'll quickly answer your big question about Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. This is a beautiful place. I don't know if you've ever been here.
no, I heard
Um,
it's. I have a friend there, and he said that it's fantastic there. I've always been interested in a possibility. It's in the back of my mind as a maybe one day. Yes.
all right, well, maybe we can get you to come. The territory is everything south of Phoenix, basically, and we border, Mexico here, and so it's a really interesting place. Latina population, immigration is a big issue, and the Jewish community here is fantastic. The
Mhm.
people, it's fascinating. I didn't know how they call themselves the Jews of the desert, and now I can say I'm a Jew of the desert. Um, and they came here, many of them generations ago, like in the 40s. Their parents maybe had allergies or asthma, and their physicians on the East Coast sent them to Arizona,
For the
said it
dry
would be
heat.
a much better place to be with your allergies and
Right.
which is fascinating. And they stayed. And it is a small but mighty community that packs a very big punch. So once upon a time, it had a separate Jewish Community Foundation and a separate federation. In 2022, it came under this one umbrella of Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. I was recruited after that happened to come in during this time of this merger, and start building for the future. And it just happened to be right after October 7th. So
Oh,
that's what we're doing on the
oh.
Federation side. We're raising money. We're shoring up our local institutions. We're working on security. We're pushing back against contemporary anti-Semitism, and we're bringing Jewish joy and
You
Jewish
do a lot of
learning.
events for the community as well, that people can come over and do things together as a Jewish community.
We do a lot of bringing people together, engaging people. And on the foundation side, I'm really proud of the work we do. It is uh, a place that our fund holders support the Jewish community, yes, but also we put millions of dollars back into the local community
That's great.
for issues of Jewish justice around homelessness, around, programs for women and girls, supporting arts in the public schools, supporting arts generally. There's so many things, that our community cares about and supports. So we're busy. We're really busy, Jonathan. Like you, we're all really busy. I don't think that's unique.
So how can people get involved if they want to support your organization?
Call us, email, it's jpsa.org. Now I have to like lift this, card up and make sure I'm giving you the right address. But Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona, you call the front desk and someone's going to meet with you, talk with you. We have a lot of organizations in Southern Arizona. So for example, if you call us and you're like, I really want to join the Masters swim team, and we're going to direct you to the JCC, the Tucson J, one of our beneficiary organizations, and we're going to, get you hooked up wherever it is you want to connect. There's a lot of ways to do it. People want to be connected to the community right now. There's opportunities for travel. There's opportunities, we have a strong Hillel at the University of Arizona. We have Jewish Family and Children Services, which does a lot of, social service, mental health support for this community, Jewish and beyond. And of course, the Holocaust survivor population, which the largest group is here in Southern Arizona.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great. Okay.
Yeah. Lots of committees. You want to be engaged, you just need to call us and we will, help you find a way to do something that's meaningful to you.
Well, here's the most important question that people care about a lot. How can people follow you and the organization on social media?
Thank you for that one, Jonathan. They can follow us. JPSA is on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I am on all of these things, although self-admittedly, I'm not the best at keeping it up. But you can follow us there. We're in the middle of revamping our community calendar so that it just really is clear and an easy place to find out everything that's going on. So that's coming soon. Look online, Google us, Southern Arizona, Jewish Tucson, and you'll find us.
Fantastic. Hava, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you. I respect all the work that you're doing tremendously. Everything that I read about you, totally admire and respect as well.
Thank you, and likewise, Jonathan. I really appreciate this. And then our appointment next week, right? Same hours.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime at all. There. Okay, hold on a second. I'll sign this off. So again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Hava Holzhauer, and please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.